A Chinese national is found murdered in Colombo's gleaming port city, carrying a passport from the South American nation of Suriname.
Right, which is just bizarre.
Yeah, completely. And meanwhile, half-world away, the Bank of Japan makes a 1% shift in a boardroom that instantly threatens to drain capital out of Sri Lankan markets.
Huge shift.
I mean, how on earth are these things connected? Welcome to RTV Global Network's Daily Deep Dive. Today's Tuesday, the 28th of July, 2026. I'm your host, Alex, and with me is our resident expert, Jordan.
Great to be here.
Today, we are looking at a massive stack of developments. We're unpacking high-stakes political and judicial shifts in Sri Lanka, an intricate web of international crime hitting the streets of Colombo, sweeping economic and trade updates, and some truly astonishing global headlines, including a World Cup shocker.
The through line today is systems under extreme pressure. We are looking at what happens when old administrative frameworks collide with, new global realities. From the psychology of a modern-day crypto heist to a decades-old aviation mystery, we're going to look at human nature, institutional bottlenecks, and global power shifts. Let's dive in.
I want to start by looking at the concept of structural permanence. Usually, when you think about a judicial system, there's this expectation of absolute, unyielding consistency.
Yeah, like bedrock.
Exactly. It's like civil engineering.
Yeah.
You lay a concrete foundation, you build the courthouse, and the rules are just set in stone. You expect the referees of society to just be constants. But you look at the headlines coming out of Sri Lanka today, and suddenly that bedrock feels a lot more like shifting tectonic plates.
That's a really good way to put it.
Because the cabinet has just approved a highly controversial proposal to extend the retirement age of Supreme Court and Court of Appeal judges by 2 years.
Which is, it's the absolute definition of institutional muddy waters. The sheer ripple effect of changing the tenure of the highest judicial officers in the land, it just cannot be overstated.
Right.
When you take a judge's retirement age and push it back by 24 months, you aren't just giving one person more time on the bench. You are fundamentally freezing the promotional timeline of the entire judicial hierarchy beneath them.
Let's look at the mechanics of that. If I'm a high court judge and I've been waiting for a seat on the Court of Appeal to open up, which only happens when someone retires or gets promoted, this cabinet decision just hit the pause button on my entire career trajectory for 2 years.
Yeah, you're just stuck.
Right. It's a bit like changing the retirement age of the referees right before a major tournament. How does that impact the public's perception of the game? You have to ask, why now?
Well, the timing is the core tension here. There are entirely neutral administrative arguments for this move, which center on the retention of experienced legal minds.
Sure, you want the veterans around?
Exactly. The Supreme Court and the Court of Appeal, they are not dealing with simple traffic violations. They are dealing with incredibly complex constitutional interpretations, massive corporate litigation, and fundamental rights petitions.
The heavy hitters.
Yeah, the really heavy stuff. You want your most seasoned, battle-tested jurists on those benches. Under the previous system, when a judge hit a specific birthday, they were forced to retire, and the system instantly lost decades of institutional memory and, nuanced legal understanding.
I hear that argument. I really do. But the pushback is deafening, and it's not hard to see why. Retaining experience sounds great in a vacuum, but in the real world of politics, it opens the door wide to accusations of political favoritism.
Oh, absolutely.
The immediate counterargument is that extending tenures right now is perceived as a reward for certain benches. Or, conversely, a deliberate mechanism to delay the promotion of younger, perhaps more independent-minded judges who are moving up the ranks.
And in a climate where public trust in state institutions is incredibly fragile, the optics are just explosive. Which brings us to the reaction from the political sphere, because Namal has actually stepped forward and called for a referendum on the Supreme Court judge's tenure.
A referendum? Stop and think about the logistical and political reality of that for a second.
It's wild.
You're talking about taking an incredibly niche, complex, internal constitutional issue, the retirement age of appellate judges, and putting it to a nationwide public vote. Do you honestly think the average voter is tracking the internal promotion timelines of the Court of Appeal?
No, of course not.
Right. Most people just want the courts to function quickly and fairly. They don't want to be handed a ballot to decide the HR policies of the Supreme Court.
The logistics would be an absolute nightmare, and the political strategy behind the call is what makes it so fascinating. Calling for a referendum takes a debate that historically happens behind closed doors, right? Like in parliamentary constitutional committees or legal chambers.
It belongs, usually.
Yeah, and it violently throws it into the public arena. Whether this is a genuine good faith call for democratic oversight or a calculated political maneuver to stall the extension by tying it up in an impossible electoral process, it highlights how intensely contested the judicial space has become.
It's a battleground.
It really is. The judiciary is no longer seen as a separate pillar. It is being actively dragged into the political theater.
And that theater has a massive cast of characters right now. We also have Deputy Minister Chaturanga Abey-Singh stepping into the fray. He publicly stated he would be, quote, very happy if the Bar Association of Sri Lanka, the BASL, issues a statement regarding Wijayadasa or his son.
The Bar Association of Sri Lanka is in a very precarious position here. They hold significant moral and legal weight in the country.
They're not just a club.
Far from it. They aren't just a union for lawyers. They are often viewed as the independent watchdogs of the legal profession and the Constitution itself.
So when a deputy minister goes on the record actively inviting or essentially challenging the BASL to weigh in on specific political figures, what is he actually doing?
He is implying immense public pressure on a legal institution to act as an arbiter of political morality, not just a strict interpreter of the law.
He wants him to pick a side.
Exactly. He is trying to leverage the BASL's credibility to validate a political narrative. If the BASL issues a statement, they risk appearing partisan. If they stay silent, they risk appearing complicit or weak.
Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
It's a strategic trap that underscores how the boundaries between the legal fraternity and political warfare are blurring.
We are talking about all this high-level, abstract maneuvering over 10-year extensions and public statements. But if you walk out of the Supreme Court and head down to the local level, the physical reality of the justice system is grim.
Very grim.
And right now, the Department of Prisons is desperately pushing to ease severe overcrowding.
This is where the abstract administrative debates collide with severe human suffering. Acting Commissioner General of Prisons Prasad Hemantha has explicitly pointed the finger at delayed reports from the government analyst as a major bottleneck causing this overcrowding.
Walk us through that pipeline. I mean, how does a delayed lab report translate to severe overcrowding in a penitentiary?
The justice system operates like an assembly line. When a person is arrested for a crime involving physical evidence, say suspected narcotics, a weapon, or a digital device, they are often held in remand custody.
Right, they're waiting for trial.
Yeah. But they cannot be formally indicted or cleared until the government analyst department tests that evidence and issues a certified report.
So you have people sitting in remand, locked in cells built for 10 people, but currently holding 50, day after day, simply waiting for a piece of paper.
Exactly.
They are waiting for a lab test on a crystallized substance or a ballistics match on a bullet.
Exactly that. The human cost of a delayed government analyst report is a person sleeping in shifts on a concrete floor in a facility packed far beyond its architectural capacity.
That's horrifying.
It is, and it connects directly back to our earlier point about efficiency. If the top-tier judges are caught in a tenure debate and the scientific analysts at the bottom are catastrophically backlogged, the entire conveyor belt grinds to a halt. The prisons effectively become the overflowing warehouse for this systemic delay.
It really paints a picture of a system entirely consumed by its own friction. But while the formal justice system is caught up in administrative bottlenecks and constitutional referendums, a very different kind of lawlessness is playing out in the shadows of the broader economy.
Yeah, a much more modern kind.
Right. This systemic vulnerability isn't just a bureaucratic problem. It's an open door for global illicit networks. The crime blotter in Colombo today reads like a script for an international espionage thriller.
We are witnessing a stark evolution in the type and scale of criminality operating within Sri Lanka's borders. It's moved far beyond local turf wars.
Let's start with the story I mentioned at the very beginning. A Chinese national was abducted from the Colombo port city and subsequently murdered. An abduction and murder is tragic under any circumstance, but investigators uncovered a detail that changes the entire complexion of this case. This individual was using a Suriname passport.
That passport is the thread that unravels a massive geopolitical and criminal sweater.
I mean, Suriname.
Right. When homicide investigators start digging into a murdered foreign national carrying a South American passport, operating in a Sri Lankan special economic zone, they realize immediately they are out of their depth if they just treat it as a local murder.
Let's break down the mechanics of that. Why would a Chinese national in Sri Lanka have a passport from Suriname?
Passports from certain nations are frequently utilized as tools by transnational syndicates. They are often obtained through opaque citizenship by investment programs or completely illicit forgery networks.
So it's basically a disguise.
Exactly. A surname passport allows an individual to bypass specific visa restrictions, evade international watch lists, and mask their true identity and origin from local law enforcement. It is a highly sophisticated operational tool.
So we aren't just looking at a random act of violence. The investigation is uncovering a complex web involving massive sums of money, deep international criminal links, and rivalries between Chinese triads or syndicates that are actively operating in Sri Lanka.
And that's the scary part.
Think about the logistics of this. You have foreign crime syndicates utilizing the port city, which was designed and marketed to be this gleaming, secure hub of international finance and legitimate investment, as a literal battleground to settle scores.
It indicates that Sri Lanka's geographic location and its push for rapid economic development are attracting not just legitimate global capital, but the dark economy that shadows it.
The criminal underbelly.
Yeah, criminal enterprises look for jurisdictions in transition. If your law enforcement is distracted by internal systemic issues like the ones we just discussed, it becomes an attractive theater of operations for triads.
I look at a murdered foreign national with a surname passport in Port City, and then I look at our next story. Missing crypto millions linked to a politician's son. Are we looking at isolated incidents or a systemic vulnerability to high-level modern crime?
The vulnerability is absolutely systemic. The nature of wealth extraction and crime is digitizing faster than local investigators can keep up.
Which is saying something, given the government analyst backlog.
Right. We are looking at a major ongoing investigation into crypto bank records and missing millions. 5 suspects have just been granted bail, and the name that jumps out is Anuda Janadith Bandara, the son of former state minister Shantha Bandara.
It's the ultimate collision of old-school political legacy with new-school digital heists. A former state minister's son tied up in a cryptocurrency robbery. It perfectly illustrates how the avenues for illicit wealth have shifted.
They've completely evolved.
We aren't talking about physical extortion or traditional bank embezzlement with paper trails. We are talking about the blockchain.
And investigating crypto crime requires a completely inverted approach to traditional policing. You're not looking for physical fingerprints or auditing a local bank branch.
You can't just raid a vault.
Exactly. You're dealing with decentralized ledgers, cold wallets, encrypted private keys, and cross-border money laundering that happens at the literal speed of light.
How does local law enforcement, which is already struggling to get basic toxicology reports out of the government analyst, handle tracing decentralized millions across global digital exchanges?
With extreme difficulty. And when high-profile individuals with deep political connections are implicated, it tests not just the technological capability of the police, but the structural impartiality of the justice system.
Can they even push back?
That's the question. Can a system handle a politically sensitive crypto investigation when the tools to obscure the crime are so advanced?
That concept of obscured actions brings us to a bizarre development regarding national security. The former State Intelligence Service, or SIS, chief, Suresh Sally. His diplomatic passport, which had been a point of massive contention, has mysteriously reappeared.
This is a remarkable, deeply concerning legal and procedural anomaly. A writ petition has been filed regarding this reappearance, and the statements made in court were incredibly sharp. The court noted that Sally did not come to court with, quote, clean hands.
Let's translate that for anyone who hasn't been to law school. Clean hands isn't about hygiene.
No, definitely not.
In equity law, the doctrine of clean hands means that a person bringing a claim to court cannot have acted unethically, illegally, or in bad faith regarding the very matter they are suing over.
If a judge is stating on the record that a former intelligence chief lacks clean hands, it is a severe judicial rebuke of his conduct. But the physical passport itself is the real story. The stamps inside this magically reappeared diplomatic passport are raising very tough, uncomfortable questions.
Because passport stamps aren't just ink. They are a chronological map of movement.
Exactly. For a former chief of intelligence, his travel history is a matter of paramount national security. If those stamps are under severe scrutiny, it suggests deep institutional concerns about where he was, who he was meeting, and under what authority he was traveling.
Especially given his background.
Right, particularly during periods of national crisis. A diplomatic passport offers immense privileges and immunities at borders. If it is being misused or if its chain of custody is broken, it represents a glaring national security gap.
It makes you question the safeguards at every level. And it's not just intelligence chiefs or tech-savvy syndicates. We also have high society business figures entangled in the legal net today. A top garment business owner, Priyal Bandula Prithijaya, has been further remanded.
It reinforces the theme that the state is attempting to cast its net wider, pulling in figures who typically occupy the upper insulated echelons of society and the economy.
But even as they cast that net, the administrative state itself is rotting from within. Look at the ex-Department of Motor Traffic, the DMT, Officer Chandrawajikakara. He was just arrested over massive unauthorized vehicle registration fraud.
This might seem like a minor administrative crime compared to a triad murder, but it is actually the foundational crack that allows everything else to happen.
How so?
Well, think about how crime operates. If you are running an illicit enterprise, you need logistics. You need vehicles to move money, drugs, or people.
And if you can bribe an officer at the DMT to fake a vehicle registration, you essentially render that vehicle invisible to law enforcement databases.
You've created a ghost fleet. State-level vulnerabilities, like fraud at the motor traffic registry, are the silent enablers of transnational crime. If you can fake a license plate, you can bypass surveillance. If a diplomatic passport isn't secure, your borders are compromised.
This systemic vulnerability isn't just a law enforcement problem, it's a massive financial liability. When foreign investors look at a jurisdiction and see triad proxy wars in the economic zones, politically connected crypto heists, and compromised government registries, the risk premium on the entire country goes up.
They get spooked.
Exactly. And we are seeing that exact financial tension play out today. Let's look at the sweeping economic and trade shifts hitting Sri Lanka, because the macroeconomic realities are hitting the ground hard.
Sri Lanka's trade relationship with the United States right now is a fascinating case study in the complexities of global commerce.
Let's start with the win, because it's a massive one. Sri Lanka just scored a major U.S. trade victory. We are talking about specific tariffs plunging from a staggering 44% down to just 10%.
This is a massive drop.
It really is. If you are running a manufacturing or export business right now, this is the difference between keeping the lights on and going bankrupt. A 34% drop in the cost of getting your goods onto American shelves completely changes your competitive edge against countries like Vietnam or Bangladesh.
It is a phenomenal, desperately needed boost for export viability. However, international trade is rarely a zero-sum game, and there's a massive caveat attached to this victory.
There always is.
Right. At the exact same time that Sri Lanka secured this tariff reduction, the country has also been named among 17 economies facing a separate 10% U.S. tariff under Section 301 action.
This is the kind of thing that makes economics feel like a rigged casino. I mean, how do you win a massive concession on one front and instantly get penalized on another? Break down Section 301 for us.
Section 301 of the U.S. Trade Act is a specific, aggressive tool the United States Trade Representative uses to address foreign trade practices that the U.S. deems unfair or discriminatory to American commerce.
Unfair way.
It's frequently deployed in disputes over intellectual property theft, forced technology transfers, or, increasingly, digital services taxes.
So Sri Lanka successfully negotiated down tariffs in one specific sector, likely traditional goods and manufacturing, but they've been caught in a broader, sweeping U.S. policy net aimed at 17 different countries over completely different trade practices.
It perfectly illustrates how fragmented and deeply complex bilateral trade is. You can be a favored ally in garment exports and a penalized adversary in digital taxation or regulatory practices.
It's a delicate, high-wire balancing act. And speaking of economic lifelines, the Asian Development Bank, the ADB, has just stepped in and approved $200 million in emergency assistance for post-cyclone Ditwa recovery.
$200 million is a substantial influx of foreign currency, which the Treasury desperately needs. But we have to categorize this money correctly.
It's not free money for growth.
Exactly. This is reactive funding. It highlights the profound vulnerability of island economies to climate shocks. This money isn't going into building future industries. It is earmarked to rebuild infrastructure that was literally washed away.
Rebuilding is crucial, but you know what is incredibly frustrating? Watching the infrastructure we already have fail completely due to bureaucratic incompetence. Let's talk about the ports. Down at the Hambantota port, the HIP, Customs is currently auctioning off 1,025 uncleared vehicles.
Over 1,000 vehicles sitting idle in a port facility. This is a massive visual representation of a logistical bottleneck.
How does that even happen? How do 1,000 cars just get abandoned by the people who imported them?
It usually comes down to the financial plumbing of the country. Vehicles typically go uncleared because the importers simply couldn't secure the foreign exchange, the US dollars, required to pay for them upon arrival.
Because the local banks couldn't back them?
Yeah, or there were severe issues with the letters of credit issued by local banks stemming directly from broader macroeconomic instability.
The importer orders the cars, the ship arrives, the bank's letter of credit fall through because the national dollar reserves dry up, and suddenly you have 1,000 cars resting in the salt air of Hambantota.
Exactly.
And the PERT issues aren't localized. Up at the main economic artery, the Colombo Port's Jaya container terminal, there are massive alarms being raised over a delayed tender to remove 4 old gantry cranes. And this is the 3rd time this specific tender has been delayed.
If you want to understand global trade, you have to look at port efficiency. A gantry crane is the massive structural apparatus that lifts shipping containers, PEUs, off the cargo ships and onto the docks.
They're huge.
They are the hands of the global supply chain. When you delay the removal of old, obsolete cranes, you delay the installation of new, faster automated ones.
I look at this and I see the exact same administrative paralysis we talked about with the government analyst reports in the prisons.
It's the exact same disease in a different organ. By delaying this tender for the 3rd time, you are literally capping the physical capacity of the Colombo port to handle modern, massive cargo ships. If a ship has to wait an extra 24 hours to unload because the cranes are slow, the shipping company pays massive demurrage fees.
And they just go somewhere else.
Eventually, yes. They just bypass Colombo and go to Singapore or Dubai.
And as these logistical failures play out on the docks, the currency itself is feeling the heat. The rupee has weakened slightly against the US dollar today.
In a heavily import-dependent economy, even a fractional depreciation matters. Every time the rupee slips, every drop of imported diesel, every metric ton of fertilizer, and every imported pharmaceutical becomes marginally more expensive for the consumer.
It's a slow bleed. But it's not entirely doom and gloom on the commercial front. We also have fresh foreign investment rolling in. Global trucking giant Dongfeng has just officially launched in Sri Lanka, partnering with Euro Motors.
This is an important positive signal. Dongfeng is a massive global player in the commercial vehicle space.
It's a big deal.
It is. Their entry suggests that, despite the current infrastructural hiccups at the ports and the currency fluctuations, multinational logistics firms see long-term viability and growth potential in Sri Lanka's transport sector.
But while we look at traditional logistics like trucking, there is a wild technology dichotomy playing out today that feels like science fiction.
Oh, this is fascinating.
Right. On one hand, we have opposition MP Rathwell going on record explicitly warning that artificial intelligence is going to wipe out Sri Lanka's business outsourcing, or BPO, revenue.
The business process outsourcing sector has been a reliable, crucial pillar of white-collar employment and foreign exchange for Sri Lanka for decades. Data entry, customer service, basic coding, transcription, these are exactly the rule-based tasks that generative AI is becoming incredibly adept at automating.
So his fear is justified.
The MP's warning isn't hyperbole. It is a very real existential economic fear for thousands of workers whose skills are rapidly depreciating in value.
I understand the fear, but look at the sheer contradiction in today's news. Because on the exact same day that politicians are warning AI will bankrupt our BPO sector, Sri Lanka just successfully performed its first ever AI-enabled surgery using a robotic arm.
It is the ultimate paradox of rapid technological advancement.
Think about the whiplash of that. AI is the boogeyman coming for outsourced jobs in a Colombo call center, but it's simultaneously a robotic arm literally saving a life in a Sri Lankan operating room, performing with a microscopic precision that a human hand could never achieve. So which is it? Are we looking at a technology that is going to bankrupt us or cure us?
The reality is that it will inevitably do both. Technology destroys old economies and relentlessly creates new paradigms. The AI that replaces a data entry clerk is cheap, scalable software.
While the medical AI is.
The AI that assists the surgeon is a multi-million-dollar hardware and software investment. The challenge for a developing economy like Sri Lanka is the speed of adaptation. Can the educational system pivot the workforce from the jobs AI is replacing to the highly skilled jobs required to maintain, program, and operate the AI infrastructure?
And it seems like there's an active institutional push to make that pivot happen. Colombo University just signed an MOU with the Sri Lanka Inventors Commission specifically to boost innovation.
That is the necessary foundational step. You have to bridge academic theory with practical, market-ready invention if you want to survive the AI revolution.
I also want to acknowledge a win in the corporate resilience sector. Budi Wickramanayake, the CEO of NBC Networks, just won Executive of the Year at the Capital Maharaja Group convention. It's a solid reminder that amidst all this macroeconomic chaos and technological disruption, individual leadership and corporate strategy are still driving results.
Leadership is the variable that determines how a company survives a storm. But as we've seen, corporate security and economic trade are inherently tied to physical security and geopolitics.
They don't exist in a vacuum.
Not at all. The trade routes, the technology imports, the foreign investments, they all rely on a stable region. And out in the waters off Trincomalee, we are seeing exactly how that geopolitical stability is negotiated and enforced.
The U.S. and Sri Lanka have officially launched the 6th edition of the CARET 2026 Maritime exercise in Trincomalee. And this isn't just a handful of patrol boats doing drills. This exercise features the U.S. Navy P-8 Poseidon.
The deployment of a P-8 Poseidon is a massive geopolitical signal. This isn't just a plane. It is one of the most advanced maritime patrol, surveillance, and anti-submarine warfare aircraft on the planet.
It's serious hardware.
Extremely serious. It drops sonobuoys, tracks submarine movements beneath the surface, and coordinates massive naval theaters.
And they are operating out of Trincomalee. Why there?
Because Trincomalee is one of the deepest, most strategically located natural harbors in the world. It looks right over the Indian Ocean shipping lanes. By conducting these exercises there, the U.S. is projecting its naval capabilities into a critical strategic choke point.
But Sri Lanka is playing a very delicate high-stakes game of strategic hedging. Because at the exact same time the U.S. Navy is flying sub-hunters off the eastern coast, we have Sri Lanka and India reviewing the progress of key bilateral development projects. This meeting was held by the Minister of Labor and Deputy Minister of Finance, Dr. Anil Jayantha-Fernando.
This is textbook diplomatic balancing. You have joint military exercises with the global superpower, the United States, in your territorial waters, while simultaneously holding high-level bilateral development meetings with the regional superpower, India, to ensure massive infrastructure and energy projects are moving forward.
Walking a tightrope.
Yeah, Sri Lanka is attempting to extract the maximum benefit from both spheres of influence without fully alienating either.
And navigating that friction is incredibly dangerous, because global friction is at a boiling point everywhere you look. Turn to the Middle East. Iran has come out today and explicitly stated that absolutely no talks are underway with the U.S., and they have set severe, strict conditions for any potential future negotiations.
That kind of absolute diplomatic stonewalling is what keeps global energy markets terrified.
Because of the oil.
Exactly. When there is zero back-channel communication between Iran and the U.S., the risk of a military miscalculation in the Strait of Hormuz, through which a massive percentage of the world's oil flows, skyrockets.
The turbulence isn't just military, though. It's democratic. Over in South Korea, a major judicial ruling just came down that redefines political accountability. A court gave ex-President Yoon Suk-yeol an 18-month suspended jail term, suspended for 3 years, specifically for violating election law.
To see a former head of state criminally sentenced for election interference, even with a suspended term, is a striking reminder of what democratic accountability looks like in a mature system.
It's pretty rare.
It is. It shows a judiciary that is completely willing and structurally able to check executive power. The contrast between that ruling and the judicial tenure debates we discussed earlier in Sri Lanka is profound.
But of all the global headlines today, the one that might have the most immediate, profound impact on the cost of living in emerging markets is coming out of Tokyo. The Bank of Japan, the BOJ, has officially raised interest rates to 1%. That is the highest rate they have seen since 1995.
This is a seismic shockwave in global finance. It's at the end of an era.
I want to spend some time here, because most people probably don't track the fluctuations of the yen on a daily basis. With the Bank of Japan raising rates for the first time in over 3 decades, how does a boardroom decision in Tokyo ripple out to crush capital markets in places like Colombo?
It all comes down to a financial mechanism called the carry trade. For decades, Japan has had interest rates at 0 or even in the negative.
So money was essentially free.
Borrowing money in Japan was essentially free. So massive global investors, hedge funds, and institutions would borrow billions of Japanese yen at 0% interest and then invest that money into higher-yielding emerging markets, like Sri Lankan sovereign bonds or real estate or infrastructure projects that yield 8% or 10%.
I love the analogy we were batting around earlier. It's literally like borrowing water from a free, bottomless well in Japan and using it to water your massive, profitable crops in Sri Lanka.
And you get to keep all the profit from the crops because the water costs you nothing. But today, the BOJ just changed the fundamental rules of the global economy. They raised rates to 1%.
The well is no longer free.
The well is no longer free. Suddenly, those global investors have to pay a toll to borrow that yen. Furthermore, higher rates usually make the yen stronger, which means paying back the loan costs even more.
The margin gets squeezed instantly.
Exactly. The immediate knee-jerk reaction is that these funds face margin calls. They start frantically pulling their investments out of emerging markets, selling off those high-yield bonds, converting the currency back, and paying off their Japanese loans before it gets worse.
So they drain the emerging markets.
This mechanism sucks capital out of countries like Sri Lanka at an incredible speed. It puts immense pressure on the rupee, which we already saw weakening today, and it makes it vastly harder for developing nations to attract cheap foreign investment moving forward. The era of cheap Japanese money is officially over, and the whole world is going to feel the liquidity drain.
It is staggering to think how a 1% shift by a central banker in Tokyo can dictate the flow of capital and the price of goods in Colombo. But while nations navigate these massive macroeconomic shockwaves and geopolitical currents, on the ground, everyday people are just trying to navigate daily life. And the reality is, sometimes, tragically, they don't make it home.
The local physical realities are almost always heavier than the global economic theories.
The road statistics today are absolutely heartbreaking. 6 people are dead in road accidents island-wide in just the last 24 hours.
6 lives extinguished in a single day. It is a silent, persistent epidemic that we have somehow normalized.
And the specifics of these crashes make it so visceral. A 49-year-old woman died when a 3-wheeler veered off the Thirukavil-Pathuvil Road in Vinayakapurama 1. There were 2 other women and 2 kids injured in that single horrific crash. In a completely separate incident, another 3-wheeler driver was killed in Gathatua.
The repeated fatal involvement of 3-wheelers highlights a severe, unsolved vulnerability in everyday public transport. They are ubiquitous, they are economically essential for mobility, but structurally, they offer virtually zero protection in the event of a high-speed collision.
They're just not built for it.
No, they aren't. When they veer off the road, the physics are entirely unforgiving.
And the dangers aren't just limited to the highways. They are built into the very fabric of the urban environment. Colombo has seen over 250 fire incidents this year alone. In response to a massive recent fire in Homagama, the Ministry of Labor is now introducing new regulations to address sudden disasters.
250 fires in half a year indicates that the intersection of public safety, urban zoning, and industrial infrastructure is failing spectacularly.
I have to push back on the government response here. Are we honestly only passing regulations after the fires burned down a warehouse? The Labor Ministry reacting to the Homagama fire feels entirely like closing the barn door after the horse is bolted. Shouldn't fire safety codes be proactive?
The reactionary nature of public policy is a massive systemic flaw. When new safety regulations are drafted only after the ashes have cooled, it indicates a profound lack of preventative enforcement.
Still just on paper.
The laws might theoretically be on the books, but if inspectors aren't checking sprinkler systems, and if regulations aren't enforced until a tragedy forces a ministry to issue a press release, the safety net is an illusion.
And speaking of illusions of safety, the sheer brazenness of street crime today is chilling. A security guard working at the Nisala Sawana Cemetery in Dehiwala was shot. The police have managed to arrest the gunman, and the detail they released is horrifying. The gunman was paid 200,000 rupees for the hit.
Stop and process that number. 200,000 rupees. That is the exact price placed on a human life.
It's nothing.
It is a terrifying metric of extreme economic desperation meeting sheer, cold-blooded sociopathy. To execute a contract killing at a public cemetery speaks to a level of organized, transactional violence that operates completely outside the bounds of a functioning society.
And that societal decay is creeping into the places we consider the ultimate safe havens for the next generation. A Haryana tuition center owner was just arrested with crystal meth.
This raises incredibly urgent questions about the infiltration routes of hard narcotics. Crystal meth, often known locally as ICE, is highly addictive and neurologically destructive.
And to find it in a school setting.
Finding a supply of it in the possession of an educator, someone who runs a tuition center and has direct daily access to vulnerable youth, is a blaring red siren for public health. It shows the supply chain is targeting demographics far beyond traditional user bases.
On top of these immense societal pressures, the violence, the narcotics, the infrastructure failures, we're also actively battling nature. There are strong winds forecast over several areas today, and the public is being urged to take severe precautions. Furthermore, the Wildlife Department has just received a fleet of new vehicles specifically to tackle human-elephant conflicts.
The human-elephant conflict is a constant, grinding war for resources and space. As agricultural lands rapidly expand and natural forest habitats shrink, these massive animals and rural farming communities are forced into violent, often fatal proximity.
It's a tragedy on both sides.
It really is. Equipping the Wildlife Department with better, faster vehicles is a necessary logistical step to respond to these encounters, but it treats the symptom, not the root cause of habitat loss.
It's a day deeply focused on public health and safety across the board. Today is actually World Hepatitis Day, with a massive global focus on completely eliminating the hepatitis B and C viruses by the year 2030. And on a hyperlocal level, health authorities are practically begging people to keep checking the dang tracker as updates remain critical due to the weather.
Disease elimination requires a dual approach. It requires high-level, well-funded policy like national hepatitis vaccination drives, but it also requires relentless grassroots community effort, like neighbors actively clearing stagnant water to fight dengue breeding grounds.
But amidst all this heavy, exhausting reality, the accidents, the fires, the crime, the diseases, we also see the incredible, enduring resilience of community and culture. Kavadi dances have been officially allowed at the Divinawara Perahera this year. Public Security Minister Ananda Wijayapala granted permission for 45 troops to perform, and what's notable is he did this despite earlier concerns raised by the police.
The Kavadi dance is a deeply spiritual, physically punishing act of devotion and communal release.
It's intense.
Very. When the state steps in at the ministerial level to ensure these cultural practices can continue, even actively overruling logistical or security concerns from local law enforcement, it shows a deep acknowledgement of how vital these rituals are to the psychological morale of a community under stress.
We also saw the celebration of Catholic Deaf Day, highlighting a community that is quite literally unheard and often marginalized in broader societal planning. And on the economic front, Korea's Food City is running vital programs to uplift vulnerable communities who are bearing the brunt of that macroeconomic pressure we discussed.
It is the ultimate duality of society. In the same 24-hour news cycle, you have contract killers taking lives for 200,000 rupees and community organizations working tirelessly to feed the vulnerable.
From the heavy, grounded realities of local streets, let's cast our net wider and look at some of the most bizarre, fascinating, and tragic events making headlines globally today. These are the stories that really capture the strangeness of the human experience.
Absolutely. The juxtaposition of human achievement and human folly is always striking.
Let's start with a massive historical discovery. The wreckage of a Pan Am plane has just been found, 74 years after tragedy struck.
74 years. Think about the incredible advancement in deep-sea sonar and autonomous underwater technology required to locate a scattered wreckage that has been hidden in the abyss for over 7 decades.
Mind-blowing.
It is a testament to human persistence, the deep psychological need for closure, and our enduring, almost romantic fascination with the unsolved mysteries of the past.
But while we deploy millions of dollars in tech to solve mysteries from 1952, modern exploration still carries incredibly deadly risks. On Mount Elbrus, which is Russia's highest and most prominent mountain, the bodies of 5 foreign climbers, believed to be Bosnian nationals, were just found.
It highlights the fatal allure of the extreme. Mount Elbrus is notoriously treacherous, with unpredictable weather systems that can drop temperatures to lethal levels in minutes.
It's unforgiving.
It contrasts so starkly with the Pan discovery. One is a tragedy of early commercial aviation. The other is the grim reality of modern individuals actively seeking out the most hostile, dangerous environments on Earth for sport and paying the ultimate price.
And then you have the danger that shouldn't exist at all. Back in the United States, a shooting at a Seattle food festival has left 2 people dead and 5 others wounded.
This is the tragic, exhausting normalization of mass violence. A food festival is inherently a place of community, leisure, and celebration.
You don't expect to be in a war zone.
To have that shattered by completely senseless, arbitrary gun violence is a very different kind of tragedy than an avalanche on a remote mountain. It represents a profound, systemic, societal failure that the U.S. continues to grapple with.
And as a jarring pivot from that darkness, the cultural economy is doing some incredibly wild things today. Original Game of Thrones dragon eggs are currently heading to auction, with heavy bidding already underway.
It is the absolute zenith of the commodification of pop culture. You have fiberglass and resin props from a fantasy television show about dragons being treated with the same reverence and securing the same astronomical financial valuation as genuine historical artifacts.
And speaking of the bizarre priorities of the modern era, our heroes look very different today. A TikTok hero is currently going viral for single-handedly solving Bangkok's notorious parking nightmare.
Bangkok has some of the most congested, poorly designed urban traffic flows in the world. And what's fascinating is that the solution didn't come from urban planners, city council budgets, or traffic police.
It came from a guy with a phone.
It came from a citizen with a smartphone who essentially gamified and organized the chaos for social media clout, inadvertently creating a highly effective civic solution.
I have to stop and ask you about this dynamic. We are living in a time where we have the advanced sonar tech to find a lost plane from 74 years ago in the deep ocean. We have robotic arms performing AI surgery. But we rely on a TikToker to figure out how to park cars in Bangkok. What does this say about our modern priorities and capabilities?
It says that our technological advancement has vastly, dangerously outpaced our civic administration. We are brilliant as a species at solving complex, singular, highly funded problems like engineering a surgical robot or mapping the ocean floor, but we are terrible at managing everyday, unglamorous human logistics.
Like the port cranes.
Exactly. Things like traffic flow or, as we discussed earlier, port crane administration and prison overcrowding. We increasingly rely on microfame, viral algorithms, and individual workarounds to fix what civic infrastructure cannot.
That is a brilliant and slightly terrifying way to frame it. From digital heroes to physical ones, let's step onto the field, because the sports world has just witnessed a seismic event. The beautiful game delivered an absolute classic today.
It was a masterclass in tactical discipline.
The World Cup finale. Spain has stunned Argentina, winning 1-0 in extra time to secure their second FIFA World Cup title. And in doing so, they defeated the defending champions who were led by the legendary Lionel Messi.
This is a monumental shift in the narrative of global football. For Spain to break through a deeply entrenched Argentine defense in the exhaustion of extra time against a team that has been historically dominant and emotionally supercharged by Messi's legacy is incredible.
It's at the end of a reign.
Spain's victory signifies a triumphant return to their strategic possession-based dominance, and for Messi, it is a heartbreaking and very likely final chapter on the global stage.
It is undeniably the passing of the torch. And we had our own passing of the torch locally in athletics today. History maker Yupan Abitun, who is officially the fastest man in South Asia, has called time on his glittering career, bringing the curtain down.
Yupan Abitun is a true trailblazer. In a region that is not traditionally known for producing elite, globally competitive sprinters, he completely shattered ceilings.
He really did.
He didn't just break time records on the track. He fundamentally changed the psychological landscape for young, aspiring athletes in Sri Lanka and across South Asia, proving that they belong on the world stage.
Yupan Abikun showed us what is possible. But with him retiring, does his career serve as an anomaly, a one-off lightning strike of rare genetics and personal willpower, or is it the foundation for future athletes to build on?
That entirely depends on the administration of the sport moving forward. If the infrastructure, the specialized funding, and the high-level coaching that propelled him are maintained, studied, and expanded, he is a foundation. If the system reverts to the mean, he remains a brilliant, isolated anomaly.
And speaking of the heavy hand of sports administration, the state is taking a very active, visible interest. President Anura Kumara Dissanayake met directly with the Sri Lanka Cricket SLC Transformation Committee to discuss core development issues.
Cricket is practically a religion in Sri Lanka, and its administration is highly politicized and deeply scrutinized by the public. When the president personally steps in to meet with the Transformation Committee, it signals clearly that the performance, governance, and financial transparency of Sri Lanka cricket is viewed as a matter of vital national prestige, not just a sporting issue.
Meanwhile, the local franchise cricket scene is thriving on its own momentum. The LPL 2026 playoff race is heating up at its final league stage, and the Galia Gallants are currently remaining on top of the leaderboard.
The LPL continues to be a crucial proving ground for local talent, offering young players the chance to experience high-pressure, franchise environments alongside seasoned international players.
And finally, a quick update for motorsport fans. Malaysia's Sepang circuit has been officially confirmed to host the rescheduled F1 Bahrain GP.
Moving a race from the dry desert heat of Bahrain to the extreme, 90% humidity of the Sepang circuit in Malaysia fundamentally changes the engineering of the race. It alters tire degradation strategies, aerodynamic drag, and places immense physical demands on the drivers. It's a massive logistical pivot for Formula One.
Well, we have covered an immense amount of ground today. We've taken you from the shifting tenures in the highest courts of Sri Lanka to the icy, tragic peaks of Mount Elbrus. We've untangled a web of crypto thieves and triad proxy wars, navigated the geopolitical waters of Trincomalee, and stood on the pitch to watch Spain claim the World Cup.
It has been a profound study in contrast today. The massive macroeconomic theories playing out right alongside the very real, heavy tragedies on our local roads.
And before we sign off, I want to leave you with a lingering thought that brings all of this together. We talked today about artificial intelligence performing incredibly intricate, life-saving human surgeries. And at the exact same time, we're auctioning off fantasy dragon eggs from a TV show, while using advanced deep-sea sonar to uncover a 74-year-old plane crash. You have to ask yourself, as our technology races infinitely forward into the future, unlocking entirely new paradigms, why does our human nature remain so deeply emotionally anchored to the past? Something to think about the next time you hear about a modern crypto heist driven by age-old human greed. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Staying well informed doesn't have to be overwhelming, and we're glad you spent this time with us. We'll be back tomorrow to connect the next set of dots.